Hello everyone and welcome to Season 6, Episode 15 of Pro Wrestling's Top 50. I'm your host Travis McNeil, and today we continue our countdown of the top 50 matches of 2021 with match number 36 on our list, which is the match between Alex Shelley and Daniel Garcia from the Beyond Wrestling Uncharted Territory Season 3 Episode 1 event held on October the 7th of 2021. I mentioned it when I discussed his match from Limitless Wrestling with JD Drake. Daniel Garcia, probably the breakout star of 2021. Very similarly to how Lee Moriarty, during 2020, just exploded through that COVID era, was wrestling everywhere, having, top-notch, high-quality matches, everything for Lee in 2020, we saw replicated with Garcia in 2021. He had tremendous success. He was picking up titles everywhere, and he was getting some really high-profile matches that would lead to his AEW run where, as we've seen, he's wrestled all of the top stars in AEW. He's somebody that I feel that Tony Khan and AEW can put a lot of trust in and know that they're going to get a quality match out of. He is so very good. Alex Shelley, I don't even know what superlatives I could use to describe Alex Shelley. And it's so weird because Alex Shelley was on the independents at the same time as all of the guys we now look back on as these big time influential independent wrestlers. I'm talking Bryan Danielson, I'm talking CM Punk, I'm talking Samoa Joe, I'm talking AJ Styles. But Shelley was maybe a couple years behind them. Like, he really didn't start to make a mark until 2003. Whereas at this point, these guys were the indie main eventers. He was coming up, he was the next in line, the next Alex Shelley, I guess we'll say, to borrow one of his old monikers. But he was so good. And he's someone that, we've seen all of these other guys, explode and be high-profile wrestlers in the WWE and be WWE champions and, be TNA world champions and win the Ring of Honor title. And now, a lot of them are in AEW and they've really gotten their flowers, whereas Alex Shelley, really hasn't, despite the fact that he should be right there with those guys. Now, different things that could be at play. Alex Shelley is someone that is very successful outside of wrestling. He has a shoot job, believe he's, an RMT or something along those lines, or a kinesthesiologist or something. But he really focuses on that. Because of that, he maybe doesn't take all of the, the bookings, and, he'll turn up on Impact, or he turned up on NXT once, or he turns up in Ring of Honor. So kind of seems like Shelley's always popping up, but, we're never getting these elongated stays. And he's someone that I think for the most part, people look at as a tag team wrestler because he's had so many successful tag team runs. He's had the Motor City Machine Guns with Chris Sabin, and he's had the Time Splitters with Kushida, where, people forget that he is an elite level singles performer. In 2021 though, or I should say late 2020, but really through 2021, Alex Shelley hit the indies with a vengeance and started wrestling all of the up-and-coming indie guys, all of the guys that we are now seeing on AEW getting put in prominent positions, like Lee Moriarty, like Daniel Garcia, like Wheeler Utah. But Shelley was working all of these guys, and it really seems like he wants to help elevate, this next grouping, the current generation of indie stars, a lot of which probably watched him when they were young and looked up to him. And it's really great to see. And if you follow Alex Shelley on social media, you'll see that he'll watch a match and be like, I want to work that guy. And that is so cool to see, because so many veteran wrestlers, make disparaging remarks and talk about these young guys and how they don't, know how to work. But then you have veterans like Alex Shelley that are trying to help these guys along. And it's wonderful to see. Alex Shelley is such an incredible professional wrestler. I hope that, he gets an AEW run, or, if he wants to do WWE, whatever. I really hope that, someday he is celebrated as much as all of those other guys of that era are, because he deserves to be right there with them. In the 2020 countdown that I did for season 1 of Pro Wrestling's Top 50, Alex Shelley had a really high ranking match with Lee Moriarty on that list. And during that video, I talked about it being maybe one of the best singles performances of Shelley's career because he's so good, because he's now in this really great veteran role. And Shelley is so good with little things in pro wrestling and these little bits of character work that he's able to seamlessly, include in his matches. And with him being the veteran, there's so many interesting ways that he can go about, depending on who he's wrestling, depending on where he's wrestling. So, as the veteran, he could be, the guy trying to keep up, right? Like we've seen a lot out of Dustin Rhodes in AEW lately, where, he's a little bit outgunned by these newer, quicker, maybe even more technically proficient guys. And he really has to go into that veteran bag of tricks to keep up. And, he can play a face in that role because, he has to fight from behind. He almost becomes the underdog, right? The old gunner trying to keep up. Or he can use that as a heel where he has to resort to those dirty tactics. On the flip side of the coin, though, he can use that veteran status and go the other way where he's, dominant over his opponents, where he has, a young, cocky guy that he's going to wrestle circles around and show him who's boss. Or, he can have this baby face that, he's using his veteran savvy to really, beat down and cheat and everything like that, where, the baby face has to beat the old guard, right? So there's so many different ways you can work the veteran story in independent wrestling. And Alex Shelley, I've seen him do all of them in various matches now, and it just shows how versatile he is. And in this particular match, he uses more than one, and it just creates this amazing, compelling thrill ride of a match that I was so happy to see it on paper. I thought these two guys would have great chemistry. Daniel Garcia is somebody that, you can clearly tell is heavily influenced by guys like Shelley and Bryan Danielson. So it really works for this wonderful match. So our story going into this one, it's really surrounding the independent wrestling title. So Wheeler Yuta was the champion. He had wrestled to a 60-minute draw with Daniel Garcia. Phenomenal match, well worth checking out. Alex Shelley was next in line for a title shot. And to me, it really seemed like this would be a great, notch in the belt for Wheeler Yuta, that he would retain the title, beating an established veteran, and kind of just a cool little thank you title shot for Alex Shelley. Never in a million years did I expect Alex Shelley to win the independent wrestling title. Ultimately, that's what he did. And a really cool, little run we got from that. But in this match, we have Wheeler Yuta at ringside. So the story kind of here is that Shelley's next in line for the title, but he wants to prove that he can beat the guy that Wheeler Yuta couldn't in 60 minutes. The opening mat work here is so good. All of the mat work in this match is impeccable. Both of these guys, amazing technical wrestlers. They all add these little kind of tiny twists and turns into their matches surrounding body work that just make it so compelling to watch. There's Daniel Garcia. This is another guy. I talk about Shelley's versatility. Daniel Garcia is just as good in that way, and he's so young, and he's still relatively inexperienced in his wrestling career. So the fact that he's as good as he is mind-blowing. And being in AEW and, getting matches like this one with Shelley, or all of the matches he's had in AEW against Punk and Danielson and Kingston and Moxley, they're really going to help him become even better that much quicker. So he's so good because he can work from underneath. He can work on top. He can be arrogant. He could be a badass. He could, be a cowardly heel. He can really work all of these angles. So during the opening mat work, Garcia is out wrestling Shelley. So they start to use, that story I talked about where it's, the old veteran that, these guys are younger, they're faster, they're in better shape, and, they can dominate you, right? You got to keep up with this young crop. So Daniel Garcia is out wrestling Shelley, and Shelley gets to the ropes. And Daniel Garcia, he's got like this kind of jockey air about him, right? He's a little bit of a punk. So he kind of like, when Shelley's in the ropes, he kind of like mounts him a little bit to get into this like dominating, intimidating position, just to like exert his dominance over him. And Alex Shelley kind of like gives him a little kiss, right? Showing that he's not going to be intimidated by him. They continue the great mat work, and Garcia continues to out wrestle him and kind of snapmares him over and kisses Shelley's head. And it's all kind of playful at the start, and Shelley's trying to get a feel for this kid. But then Garcia, he uses a basement drop kick really early in the match and kicks the match into the next level. And it almost pisses off Alex Shelley a little bit, where he kind of gets that chip on his shoulder and he kind of plays it like he does in that Lee Moriarty submission match in AIW, where he feels disrespected. And so he proceeds to just turn up his speed a little bit. And he wails on Garcia with a dragon kick to the back, which, if you listen to old school, Eddie Kingston on IWA Mid-South commentary is one of the most disrespectful things you could do, those dragon kicks to the back. And Shelley just proceeds to slap Garcia in the head and disrespectful boots to the head, basically saying, okay, young punk, you don't know who you're messing with. Let's do this thing. And there's this great moment too where Alex Shelley, after Garcia has had an answer for every hold that Shelley tries and has really out-wrestled him, Alex Shelley goes deep into the bag of tricks and he grabs a pendulum. And because he has every limb of Garcia tied up in this pendulum hold, Garcia can't escape. Shelley knows he's not going to win the match with that hold, but it was so great just to see him be like, okay, punk, I've got you now. I'm going to make you suffer for a little bit. You think that you can out-wrestle me, but I'm the veteran. You can't do it. And he lets him go, and from there proceeds to start working the back of Garcia a little bit. Shelley kind of gets this arrogant air about him after that and kind of, shifts from the veteran trying to keep up the start to now the cocky veteran that's trying to use and abuse the young guy a little bit. And he's taunting him a little bit, and Garcia, he tries to fight back with forearms. It leads to this great strike exchange, but then Garcia, as Shelley's coming off the ropes, hits a brutal chop block, and they just completely turn the match back around, where now we're back to Shelley fighting from underneath. Garcia, the rookie, went dirty, and he's going to use whatever tactic he can, and now we have this great story of this young, disrespectful punk and the veteran trying to scrape and claw and hang on. And Garcia is so good. Like I mentioned these little things. So we, post Shelley's leg around the post, ties up his leg on the ropes, and then as Garcia's getting into the ring, he steps on Shelley's knee, which is tied up in the ropes to get in the ring. And it's just these little things that are so good that just, add to this overarching story that we have through the match. And they're just so wonderful. And they, as the viewer, they completely, take you into things. And it's great to see. Shelley is so good in this match selling the knee. It gives out on an Irish whip. Garcia works the knee so good with dragon screw leg whips. Shelley tries to get an opening and slingshot into the ring, but he gets caught in an ankle lock, which is transitioned into a knee bar. He gets the ropes, so Garcia kind of pulls him back and grabs another one. And again, I talk about little things that are so good. When Shelley's in this knee bar, he's going to exert so much, pressure on his knee, trying to crawl while, Garcia's got this heel hook in to get to the ropes, and he just did it once, and it meant nothing because Garcia got him back in the hold. So he actually grabs Garcia's arm and uses the leverage to roll Garcia over so that they roll into the ropes. It's such a little thing, but it's so, so good. Shelley is constantly just trying to fight off dragon screws and all of this leg work. Garcia kind of hooks Shelley's knee into the ropes and starts chopping him. And whether this was intentional or not, I loved this as a callback to Daniel Garcia's match against JD Drake in Limitless, which we've already talked about on our countdown, where Garcia kind of got, tied up Andre the Giant style in the ropes and got unloaded with chops. Well, here Garcia's using that because, he felt disrespected and embarrassed when Drake did that to him. So now he's doing the same thing to Shelley, and it's really, really good. And we get this moment where Garcia goes back to the well again for another dragon screw. Shelley kind of spins out of it and hits this big super kick, but it's with the bad leg. So, he's selling the bad leg and he can't really do anything. He tries for the Border City stretch. He grabs that wrist control, but Garcia's able to fight out. So we get this great moment where Shelley's got this wrist control on Garcia. And, Garcia starts throwing these forearms like he did earlier, and Shelley, is absorbing them, and he's got, all of the fighting spirit. He starts throwing chops back as kind of a revenge for when he was caught up in the ropes, and, Garcia's bumping off these chops, and Shelley's pulling him back up, and Garcia's able to fight out of this wrist control, but leaves himself exposed, and Shelley throws another super kick, this time with the good leg, because he knows he can hit that and not take the damage. And it was so good to see these guys do all of these moves, which you know, in a lot of matches are kind of forgotten about, but here they pay so much attention to those small details. The super kick with the bad leg, you can't capitalize. So the next time you're throwing a super kick, you're making sure you're using that good leg. It's so good. And it's so, you know, it's such a good payoff for the viewer. We're investing our time and our minds in this match so that both of these wrestlers treat that with the utmost respect. And it's really wonderful. We get this moment where, you know, Garcia, he starts no-selling kicks, and he had just recently, he was either about to wrestle Minoru Suzuki, or he had just wrestled Minoru Suzuki for West Coast Pro Wrestling out in California. So, you know, he does the Suzuki tongue stick out thing and starts going into that, you know, no-selling these kicks. But, you know, Shelley, again, he capitalizes on Garcia's, you know, arrogance and taunting, and he nails him with the final cut, and he grabs the Border City stretch, but Garcia is able to get the ropes. Garcia goes back to that Minoru Suzuki playbook, and this time it works for him, because rather than use, you know, the Suzuki taunting, he uses Suzuki's techniques, and it throws Shelley off. Alex Shelley has never wrestled Minoru Suzuki, to the best of my knowledge, so he doesn't see this coming, and Garcia uses the Suzuki misdirection into the rear naked choke, turns it into an Oklahoma roll, back to the ankle lock with the knee bar. It was a great sequence, a great false finish. Shelley was able to get the ropes out of it. We get back to the strike exchange where both guys are trading forearms, and Garcia, just being the dirtbag that he is, he kicks out the knee. When Shelley is, you know, really getting in the strike exchange, he's taken off the, you know, off the tape and says, okay, you know, young blood, we're going to do this. And what does Garcia do? Again, the punk kid kicks out the knee. It's so good. He hits a pile driver for 2. He grabs a sharpshooter on, but when Garcia does a sharpshooter, he really leans back on it so that him and his opponent are almost back-to-back lying on the mat. And it's really cool, and it looks really painful. But Garcia goes for that there, but Shelley knows that this is a Garcia move, and he also knows how to counter almost anything. So when he leans back-to-back, he leans back way too far, and Shelley's able to hook him in the Border City stretch. It's so good. Garcia turns that back into a sharpshooter, but Shelley's able to counter that into a roll-up. Garcia comes charging in. He's a little bit frazzled. You know, his sharpshooter led to him, you know, being caught in a submission, which he wasn't expecting. He tried it again and almost got pinned, which he wasn't expecting. So he rushes in at this point, knowing that Shelley has the bad leg, and one more shot might take him down. Shelley catches him with a big overhead belly-to-belly suplex into the corner, hits the shell shock for 2 on the kickout, transitions it right into the Border City stretch. Daniel Garcia has no answer for it whatsoever and submits in what I thought was a little bit of a shocking finish because, you know, yes, Shelley had the title shot, but I still thought that ultimately we were working towards Yuta and Garcia for the title again after their draw. And the story here was so good where Alex Shelley in 20 minutes got the upset victory over the guy that the champion couldn't beat in 60. And it led to the real shock, I believe, the next night where Alex Shelley beat Wheeler Yuta, won the IWTV Independent Wrestling Championship, blew me away. That was a great match too, a narrow miss on the top 50. And it led to Shelley, you know, getting this couple-month reign, maybe getting his flowers a little bit as a thank you for everything he's done on the indies. To me, it's not enough. We need it in a major promotion. But it led to this great run. And Alex Shelley, you can tell he is having a hell of a time just, you know, putting over these young guys, getting in the ring with these young guys, helping them develop, doing training seminars. It is so wonderful to see a veteran like Alex Shelley use that veteran status to help the current generation of professional wrestlers, you know, rather than be detrimental to them. So my hat goes off to Alex Shelley, an all-time legend, deserves all of the respect in the world. And I hope, you know, all of these young wrestlers that are getting the opportunity to wrestle him, you know, really sit under that learning tree that is Alex Shelley and are able to pick up so much because it's only going to help them in the long run. This match is available, like all Beyond Wrestling matches, on IWTV. It's also available for free on YouTube, which is super cool. So I will link that on my Twitter page. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Wrestling50. Follow me on, or I should say subscribe to the channel here on YouTube so that you never miss a video. And please join me again next time as we continue to count down Pro Wrestling's Top 50.